Hi, my name is Alex Cameron, and you have found the Decarb Connect podcast. Our mission is to have a look at how we can accelerate industrial decarbonisation. We're going to do this by bringing together stories, evidence, and project updates from across the hard-to-abate sectors. These are companies that are already pursuing decarbonisation, trialling early-stage demos, pilots, and establishing the strategies that are going to help us achieve net zero 2050. Lots of tough budgets, plenty of tough decisions, but also plenty of evidence around what is already possible. I hope you enjoy it. Hello. Today, I am very pleased to be interviewing Aniruddha Sharma, who is the CEO of Carbon Clean Solutions. Having just said your name, perhaps you could introduce yourself with a little background on, what you're doing, and then we'll go from there.
Alex, thank you very much. Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me in this very interesting series that you're running. I am co-founder and CEO of Carbon Clean Solutions, a company based here in London, focused on delivering breakthrough technology for carbon dioxide capture, which is essentially a concept where you remove the carbon dioxide, main cause of global warming. You remove it from the smokestack of power plants, chemical plants, steel plants, and other industrial units.
And we're going to talk a little bit, a little later on in the conversation about your recent funding round and also some of the projects and learnings from those projects that you have been developing. But let's start with something a bit different. So we, when you and I first talked about having this conversation, one of the things that came up was, I guess, when you read around the industry, you look at trade journals, you look at the FT, whatever publication you're looking at, there's a real mixture of optimism, pessimism, confidence, and then a whole load of people are just not sure what they're doing. And I was interested in your view on this. You're working with industrials who are getting on with decarbonisation projects, and I just interested in your view on what is needed from these kinds of companies in the hard-to-abate sectors to be able to achieve net zero 2050. What do you see as the sort of hallmarks of those companies that are really going to be able to make that work?
Alex, I think this is a great opportunity. Climate change is real. It's a real threat that all of us are facing. And I think the opportunity to decarbonize assets, to approach circular economy is real. And it's going to be one of the biggest opportunities that we're going to face as we move towards, or as we go towards net zero 2050. My personal view is companies must be very pragmatic in their approach, and they should put an actionable plan that looks at short, medium, and the long term. We know for a fact that renewable energy in the long run is going to provide 100% of our energy and consumption needs. There's no doubt about that. It's going to happen. But I think in the short to medium term, while we're switching away from fossil-heavy industry and fossil-heavy use all the way to renewable infrastructure, I think there is a space and there is a need for thinking about decarbonization, how to facilitate this transition very quickly and very smoothly, very efficiently. I think new technologies like carbon capture, utilization, storage, or in short, we can also call it as CCUS, have a very crucial role here to play in helping cut the emissions, specifically from hard-to-abate industries like steel, cement, refining, and waste incineration. And all these industries, the reason they're called hard to abate is because you can't just switch them off tomorrow and say, okay, there are no more CO2 emissions. We will need these industries for some time to come, till the time we find better and more sustainable ways of doing things or change our lives completely. These industries are going to stay with us. So I think there is definitely a need for a plan of decarbonizing these industries and these companies in a sustainable yet in a profitable way.
Out of interest, when you typically at the point that you're engaging with an industrial, what would you say the proportion is of people that you speak to that have that plan? Like, do most people have it by the time they interact with Carbon Clean Solutions, or are you kind of part of that early stage thinking that they're going through?
Well, I would say it's very much the latter. We are very much the part of early stage thinking, helping these companies come up with their first plan, so to say, which they can take to the management and to the boards. I would say from an industrial decarbonization perspective, we are very much in early days of plans or early days of thinking here. You can very much compare this to 2006, 2007 for renewable energy. People were just thinking about it. People were getting excited. They were thinking about making a switch to 100% renewable, partial renewable. And we're just at the cusp of that fast growth in terms of reducing carbon emissions and decarbonizing these huge industrial assets out there.
Is the impediment the barrier? Is it like a kind of a confidence issue, or is it a lack of information, or is it something way more pragmatic than that? What's your sense of what's holding up some of the bigger companies from setting these sorts of plans?
I think it's a mix of a few things. One is, while we know the end goal, which is decarbonization by 2050 or net zero by 2050, I think the path to that net goal is not very clear. Everyone is trying to work very hard to figure out what is that path they can take till 2050 and get to that decarbonization goal. So I guess that's one challenge. The second challenge people are trying to face and they're trying to overcome is how do you create value in this whole process? Decarbonization inevitably will mean that we'll have to move away from fossil fuels or fossil fuel operations, fossil fuel heavy operations. We'll have to move away from them completely in many cases. This has a potential of 100% change for a lot of the companies and their ways of operation today. So I think people are also trying to figure out what's the best, most sustainable, profitable, and valuable way of getting there to that next target. That's incremental target that will get them to net zero by 2050. I think the third thing is just the lack of right options or availability of the right technology. It does seem like the options those were existing today were very, very expensive out there, and people were waiting for something new to come up. So I guess, and that's really where our company comes into play and say that, look, we've got this breakthrough technology and we can help you reduce cost really, really by quite a lot and get to that decarbonization path quite cheaply and quite cost effectively.
Yeah, it's an interesting one that I know that during a lot of the kind of background conversations I've been having across the industry, that whole thing of obviously cost has come up so many times. And there's a real sense that some people are waiting for the incentives or the taxation environments change. Some people are waiting for the opportunity perhaps to join what seem like, those winning collaboration projects where people can share costs, but it's definitely a factor that's causing people to wait. But that point about technology sort of leads me to another point. There is so much coming up at the moment, so many different types of, let alone decarbonization technology. There's so much, even in carbon capture and in specific kind of the actual kind of chemical or engineering solutions that are possible. I'm sort of interested in what's emerging that interests you. And then on the other side of that question, what do you think industrials could do or should do to get ready for that kind of next opportunity?
Very good question, Alex. I think the options or the technology space as far as industrial decarbonization, carbon capture, utilization, storage, energy transition, I think that the whole technology space is changing very, very rapidly and significantly. Every day there are new projects, those are being launched, and bolder efforts being put together to get to very low cost of carbon capture or decarbonizing industrial assets. A lot is going on. From an overall technology landscape, in terms of carbon capture, utilization, storage, you've got a couple of options are going on there. You've got systems; those are very well proven, traditional systems. Then you've got completely breakthrough next generation systems, and then you've got out of the box ideas like direct air capture, capturing CO2 from air. Our company is very much focused on next generation breakthrough technology, so that middle category that is looking at utilizing the experience people have already had with capturing carbon dioxide. I mean, oil and gas industry, they've been doing it for 50 years in the US now. So our technology looks at utilizing what has already been operating, but then completely changing it radically so that the equipment sizes, the costing of carbon capture could go down quite significantly. And to give you an idea, you mentioned a good point about taxation and the value and how all this work. Our own internal target is to get to a less than $30 per ton cost of carbon capture. We believe if we can get to that number and take our customers to go to that number, then you can quite well offset your cost of capture versus the carbon credit or the tax that you're paying. it could actually it could very well become a net value generating or net profitable solution, because instead of paying taxes, which is a yearly cost, you're now decarbonizing your site and you're doing much more good to the environment.
Have you, I mean, I mean, based on that kind of $30 per ton, that obviously would fit within a range of cost that I think any company would say was well worth exploring, and are very different from what most people are assuming their budgets will need to be today. What's your best guess? And I understand it's a guess because we're all kind of early stage in this journey. What's your sense of the timeline to that sort of pricing?
Again, very good question, Alex. So I think with any technology, you have to scale this up to a certain size to be able to enjoy the full benefit of of what the technology has to offer. I would say we are very much in the early demonstration phase. We have currently 2 plants running, one in the UK and one in the US, where we are demonstrating this live to customers, to potential partners. The idea, the timeline that we are pursuing is within next 18 to 30 months, we should be able to get to a mid-sized commercial unit. And when I say mid-sized commercial unit, it's about 100,000 tons per year of CO2 capture. In industrial sense, this will allow most of the industrial companies we work with, this will allow them to reduce anywhere between 10% to 25% of their carbon emissions. So what we want to do is within the next 18 months to 30 months to showcase that it is possible to decarbonize 10 to 25% of a large operating industrial asset with an average price of about $30 per ton. And we believe that will be a very good incremental step if we can get there in next 18 to 30 months.
That's interesting, because I know, again, when we first had a chat about doing this podcast together, one of your points was that there is an opportunity here for people not to have to wait for some big, dramatic, massive step forward, but to actually take these incremental gains and build and scale. So that idea of, maybe it's 10% to begin with or more is really, I think that's interesting to me. And I wondered, what do you think, what does that mean in practice for an industrial? Why would that be important for them? What's your, tell me a bit more about that view.
So, any industrial site, they have actually optimized their processes, the ways of working and their operations over a very long period of time. Introduction of any new system or unit on site need to be perfected, because all these units, they are like kind of must-run unit. I mean, a waste incineration plant or a steel plant or a cement plant, you're probably looking to run it 96% of the time. So you need a very high level of uptime. I think a 10% decarbonization target to start with for all these industrial sites will allow them to learn much more about the technology that can help them capture carbon dioxide. But more importantly, it will also help them learn more about how does this unit interact with their existing plant, how much space is required, what kind of manpower is required. And they can then build all those protocols in before they go and scale up to the next level, which will be 50% decarbonization or a 75% or 100% decarbonization. So I think it's a very good 10% decarbonization target is a very good stepping stone, so that you can, at a reasonably commercial scale, decarbonize that, showcase that you can decarbonize the plant very sustainably and cost effectively. But at the same point of time, train your workforce on this new plant, this new system that will be built on site. So that's just the operation side and the technology side of things. There is a very important angle to this 10% target as well. And that's the commercial side of how does this whole decarbonization work and how does it become sustainable? The point around carbon capture, utilization, and storage is to capture the CO2 and ideally use it to produce another product that you can sell, or store it offshore. Now, if you think about the new chain, if you're a refinery today, you're going about your daily business, you're producing a product. If you have to capture carbon dioxide and produce a new product out of it, you also have to evaluate what business models will work. You need to potentially get into new supply chains, potentially new markets. So at 10%, all these industrial companies would also start thinking about, if they go into decarbonization, what other supplemental value chains they can diversify in and make this whole decarbonization effort sustainable and profitable.
So Yeah, this whole idea of getting a company to make kind of these step changes, moving forward incrementally is really interesting to me, not least because one of the conversations that's come up a couple of times with people I've spoken to is, however much a board or the kind of leadership are built in, at the end of the day, you still have to get the plant director, the workforce really engaged in this. Otherwise, early stage projects either won't get an easy sign off or, the whole process of running them can become more challenging. And I was just interested in have you experienced any of those kind of challenges, or have you found that actually everyone that you connect with within that field of stakeholders is fully engaged? I don't know, just if you can expand a bit on who is it that you typically engage with and the kind of how you're making it work with them, that would be helpful.
So I would say that, look, most of these industrial processes, they have most of the industrial sites we work with, they have processes set. You need to give them enough comfort that whatever you're doing is actually worth their time and effort and money. But once you're over that first hump, then most of the sites and customers that I'm engaged with are actually very involved with this. I think climate change is one of those issues that's close to everyone, because it's also an issue that's very close to the younger generation. When these plant managers, plant directors, when they go home, they've got kids. The kids will always come back and ask, "What are you doing to secure my future as far as climate change is concerned, or the disastrous impact of climate change is concerned?" So I think people are actually quite aware, and they engage once they get over that first time. I guess a couple of examples that I could probably give you here. Our customer base is quite diverse. So we've got steel plants, power plants, chemical plants, refineries, cement plants, waste incineration units, who are working with us to get to a place where they can start decarbonizing their units, get to that first stepping stone. A couple of examples is, for example, our partnership with Liquid Wind, which is a project based in Sweden. Very interesting project. There's a local refinery. There is a local paper and pulp mill. The idea is to capture the carbon dioxide from these two assets, mix it with hydrogen produced from offshore wind energy, and again use offshore wind energy to produce sustainable fuel for shipping industry. Shipping industry is one of the most difficult industries to decarbonize. I mean, we don't have electric ships now. There is a discussion around that, but I think it's still far. So this is a very interesting project where you are taking literally the waste of two assets or two plants and converting it into a sustainable fuel. A second example I can give is from India, Dalmia Cements. It's one of the largest cement producer in India. They have announced a target to get to net zero by 2040. So really aggressive in their thinking and in their actions. We have signed a partnership with them to help them decarbonize one of their large plants to capture the CO2 and convert into products that they can then sell into the market. So again, they're doing a lot of work on mapping what these supply chains are, what these products could potentially be used for, how they will be sold, who will use it, what's the circular economy infrastructure that need to be built. But again, I'm quite proud of our partnership with Dalmia Cements, in this case in India.
The way that collaborations form as a company progresses through scale, obviously that changes how you assess the beginning of a relationship, how you assess whether it's going to be a good collaboration. So what do you now consider to be the kind of hallmarks of a great collaboration, one that's going to work for you, but also is going to work for the partner involved as well?
I think there are three key ingredients as far as a great collaboration is concerned. First one is a common ambition and a common goal. Both partners must be absolutely clear on that one common target they want to get to. So I think that's absolutely key. Second is the openness and transparency. Both partners must be absolutely open and transparent about what do they have and what can they bring on the table to get to that end goal and succeed. And I would say the third thing that's also super important, especially if you're working with large partners, is engagement from the very top. You may be able to excite people on the ground, maybe able to excite people on the technical roles, especially the innovation is concerned. But I think an excitement at the very top level of two partners really energizes the people who are working on the partnership.
So let's put you in different shoes. You're now in the shoes of being a CEO or CTO of one of the big industrials. Tell me a bit about what would you do to ensure a real chance at kind of delivering scalable decarbonization?
Okay. This is a lot of times, my counterparts would ask me the question, the CEOs of a large company. I think a couple of things that I would do, or I would potentially try to do and motivate my team to do. The first thing is, let's have a plan. Getting to 2050 net zero, that's a long-term target, but we definitely need to have the milestones, basically like the short-term, medium-term, and then that long-term milestone. So let's first have the plan. Planning is the absolute key. And second is, I would emphasize on understanding the rollout plan. How do we get to that first milestone that tangibly proves that application of a technology or an option is absolutely the way to go? So 10% markets, generally what I've learned from my conversation with other CEOs or the senior management of these companies, they would say, well, actually, let's see if we can do this for 10% of our operating capacity. And if yes, we can do that successfully, it gives us a very good stepping stone to go up. The third thing I would do is I would map the business model. Carbon dioxide capture, CCUS, energy transition. It's going to potentially open up a lot more business model and an opportunity to produce a lot more products out of that. So it's quite important for the leaders to understand what that new business model is going to look like, what that new way of doing business is going to look like, and to really get a grip on that. So I guess those are the three things I would focus on if I were running a large corporation.
That last one is interesting. And I know a lot of people have questions like, okay, we capture all this. What do we do with it? How do we build that into a business model that we can develop for ourselves? I think those are really, really useful. So let's flip it around the other way. If you were talking to a brand new startup or a company that's only just starting to look at transfer of technology out of an academic environment, perhaps, what's the best advice that you would give them? So Aniruddha, however many years ago, what do you wish you could tell him then that would have helped him progress?
Product market fit. I think that's one of the most undervalued options or things the entrepreneurs look at when they're starting a new company or a new business. They're quite excited about technology. I mean, I come from a technology background as well, and so is my co-founder. And we are quite excited about technology. But what we didn't quite understand at that point of time is, what's the product market fit? Where is the demand? Where does this fit with our customers? So, if you look at Silicon Valley, some of the stats coming out, about 90% of the companies, early stage companies, do fail because there is no demand for the product. They didn't map the product market fit well enough when they got out there and started the organization.
Okay, so you've already mentioned, and as I say, congratulations on this amazing funding that you've secured for some pretty big heavy hitters across a range of sectors, actually, not only in oil and gas, but also other sources as well. So tell us a bit about what do you see that enabling you to do? Where do you hope to see Carbon Clean go next?
We will be using the funds to grow the team quite substantially. We are a small team currently based here in, some of us are here in London, a couple of us are in the US, and a couple of us are in India. We are now looking to expand the team quite significantly so that we can deliver on the product demand that's coming to us. We're seeing some of the sectors like steel, cement, waste management, refining and petrochemicals are very interested in progressing towards CCUS, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So they will be very much focused on delivering a product for our customers in this space. Despite the current economic circumstances, we've seen numerous businesses coming to us and asking us for advice or product that could help them decarbonize their existing sites. I think what we want to do is we want to have enough capacity that could help all these companies who are coming to us. They are very much thinking about net zero. They're very much thinking about what next for them. I think the current pandemic has opened up certain opportunities for these operating industrial sites as well. So we'll be very much focused on now commercializing the technology, growing the team, getting the word out there, and delivering more and more projects as we go forward.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting few months, I think. My last question is just really to kind of round back to the beginning about how you came into decarbonisation at all. This is maybe, I guess it's a personal interest of mine, because I sort of came into this myself assuming that everybody had been an oil and gas engineer or something like that. I don't know, but tell me a little about how did you find yourself working on a decarbonisation technology project?
So it actually goes back even before I was born. There's a bit of a story. I come from a very small town in India called Bhopal. It's one of the towns famous for wrong reasons. World's largest industrial gas leakage
Nicole.
disaster
Yeah.
happened in that town. On the day the industrial disaster happened, 4 days after that, my parents were to get married. And as you know, you may probably know about Indian weddings. The whole family tree comes up, and anything less than 1,000 people is just not a wedding. So we had everyone from our family, even distant relatives, in Bhopal at that point in time. So when this industrial disaster struck, it actually literally struck everyone in the family. Everyone got affected because of this gas leakage. And I grew up listening stories about the industrial disaster and what happened and impacting people, different symptoms they had. And all it had that thing sort of put a seed in my head that if we do not control the industrial processes, something like this could happen again, or could happen anytime. I feel the same way about climate change. We are using whatever fossil fuels we can produce today. We are emitting as much CO2 we can. It's going up all the time. And if we can't control that, if we don't stop it, especially now, dramatically stop it, we'll get to a position where the effects of climate change will impact all of us really, really, really badly. So that's the genesis of how I got interested in decarbonization, climate change. Back in 2005, 2006, when I was at the university, I studied at Indian Institute of Technology in India. I was involved a bit in policy advocacy around climate change. So I was a member of Indian Youth Climate Network, really youngsters focused on pushing the government to do something tangible. Even went to represent the Indian Youth Climate Network in Copenhagen, Climate Change Conference in Copenhagen. But when I came back from there, I really realized that the power of change could potentially be brought in by the impact of technology. It's not like people don't want to do anything. It's just that it's so expensive to make it work today. So that's really when I started a discussion with a good friend of mine, Prateek, who's my co-founder and our CTO. We used to live next to each other. We were neighbors in the hostels at the university. We started talking, and I realized Prateek was actually working on a potential solution that could reduce the cost of CO2 capture very significantly. I asked him, literally on a casual coffee conversation, I asked him who is doing it in India, and he said no one. And I said, well, why don't we do it? So 12th October 2009, that was the genesis of Carbon Clean Solutions at Indian Institute of Technology. We started from there. Slowly, steadily, our research got recognized. In 2012, the British government gave us £4 million, $6 million. That allowed us to come to the UK and truly collaborate with world-leading universities like Imperial College, University of Leeds, University of Sheffield, to take the technology really from the initial idea, to all the way to semi-commercialization phase. So that's just the story about Carbon Clean Solutions. We commercialized the product in 2016, started building plants. We are now operational at 40 plus units in Europe and in India. And we've recently raised this funding, quite excited about how do we go from these 40 demonstration/commercial plant all the way up to our vision, which is helping industrial companies reduce 1 billion tons of CO2 per year.
I love that story of kind of those multiple influences coming in behind your decision to get involved with your friend and co-founder. That's really interesting. One of the things that I really love about the kind of conversations I've been having, not just through the podcast, but in general, is the variety of backgrounds and drivers for people wanting to do what they're doing here. And some of it is, I'm an engineer and I love the technical challenge, but I've also spoken to people like you who have more of a kind of a personal drive that's also got them where they are, or perhaps, in fact, you mentioned it earlier that sometimes it's even people's families or other things that can be the driver for them wanting to make these changes. So there's some brilliant human stories that underpin quite a lot of the technical and project advances that we're seeing, which is great. Well, thank you for taking some time to talk with us. I'm sure that just 2 weeks after closing a series of funding, there's many things that your team wishes you were doing right now. So I really appreciate the time that you've taken just to talk to us a bit about the business and also some of your thoughts. Any final comments from you?
Well, I mean, I I would probably conclude by saying, Alex, the work you're doing is really great work. Bringing these podcasts out, these stories out. It's really important to spread the message and to educate the people of what's out there, what's happening, what are their options today. I talk to so many industrial companies who come to us. They just don't know how to deal with that. They understand and they know they have to do something quickly, and they potentially want to do something quickly as well, but they just don't know what's happening. So I think what you're doing here is really good and a really great platform to bring all this knowledge together for people to access and learn from it. So kudos, great work.
Thank you. Well, and thank you again for taking part. If you've enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share it. If you would like to be involved in a future podcast, get in touch with me at ac@decarbconnect.com, or you can get in touch through our website, decarbconnect.com, which is also where we will be posting the podcasts as we release them. Bye for now.